thing to highlight today, which is very exciting, and going back to the point that we've been talking about adaptation at this COP, we have one plan that emerged quite late in the process, but that we're very excited to see, which is about an alliance to implement NAPs, National Adaptation Plans. And the idea is that we're bringing together a number of institutions that are supporting the countries in capacity building, much like we have the NDC partnership, but focusing on delivery of the adaptation plans. So that is again happening today, alongside also a session on the global ethical stocktake, which is bringing us back to why is it that we're not able to deliver, why is it that we're not able to do what we know we need to do, that Minister Marina has been leading brilliantly. So with that, I would like to pass on to our guests. I will first pass on to Marinês to tell us a little bit about the Oceans Package.
Alô. Bom dia. Boa tarde, melhor. Todos e todas. Good afternoon, everyone. At COP30, ocean action is not peripheral. It sits at the heart of the Presidency's action agenda as the key objective 7, alongside forests and biodiversity. And that matters because everything is connected. We live in one planet, and the ocean, together forests and biodiversity, is what keeps that planet stable, livable, and in balance. To implement what we need to restore and protect coastal zones and marine ecosystems, and to ensure that ocean continues to act as the planet's main climate regulator, we created the Blue Package, our plan to accelerate ocean-based solutions. The Blue Package is a roadmap for action. It was co-created by non-state actors, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change of Brazil and the COP presidency. It links national commitments, especially the growing number of blue NDCs, with the global efforts already underway. This coherence is essential. It allows countries to move from ambition to implementation and from pledges to real outcomes on the ground and in the water. Together, the Blue NDC Challenge and the Blue Package create a strong structure to unlock financing, attract private investments, and build credible pipelines for ocean climate action. The Blue Package is implementation ready, built around the principles of sustainable ocean planning and management, and delivered through the ocean breakthroughs. It includes 27 overarching outputs and around 70 solutions on ocean renewable energy, shipping decarbonization, sustainable aquatic food, marine conservation, coastal tourism, entrepreneurship and innovation, how to include peoples of the ocean, and potential transition options for offshore oil and gas. These solutions direct support mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity protection, food security, and coastal resilience. To deliver this portfolio, we estimate an investment need of 130 to 170 billion US dollars till 2030. This figure gives Ministers of Finance, development banks, and private investors a clear sense of the scale required and of the opportunities ahead. But unlocking this capital depends on enabling conditions, the right regulations, the risk instruments, and the blended finance approach. Implementation also requires accountability. That's why I'm very pleased to say that one of the important outcomes of this COP30 is the launch of the Ocean Breakthroughs Dashboard, a transparent, systematic tool for tracking progress, what makes it transformative in its focus on evidence. It tracks progress against science-based targets for 2030. It identifies gaps where we need to course correct. It provides governments, business, philanthropy, and civil society with a shared evidence base, and it rebuilds trust by showing where collective action is and it's not on track. The dashboard went live yesterday. You are all invited to have a look. It represents a new social contract for ocean climate action. Our message is very simple. The science is clear. The ocean is the main climate regulator. The solutions are ready, are there. The costs are understood, and the tools to track progress are in place. And we need to move the ocean-based climate solutions from plans to implementation. If fully delivered, the Blue Package can help cut global greenhouse gas emissions by up to 35% by 2050, more than a third of what's needed to keep 1.5 degrees within reach. We are confident that the COP30 presidency and all parties understand the central role of the ocean and are ready to advance the implementation of ocean-based solutions for the climate crisis in the final COP30 documents. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Mr. Topping.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I thought I'd reflect a little bit on just how significant this development of the action agenda is and give a little bit of the flavour of how momentum is accelerating across the different sectors. I think it's just worth reminding ourselves that the action agenda is not a brainchild of the Brazilian presidency, but is the brainchild of the parties in Paris. It's part of the Paris Agreement that created the action agenda, created the role which I had the honour of holding for COP26 and 27. But of course the parties have had a lot of stuff to negotiate since Paris, a very complex rule book. Any of you who are at COP26 may remember it took a very long time for President Alok Sharma to gavel through many, many detailed decisions. Of course, getting used to the whole cycle of NDCs and most importantly, the global stock take. So I think there's something symbolic for me about the fact that we have now much more balance between attention on negotiations, which is ongoing and important, and attention on implementation, which is, of course, what everything is about. And it's somehow symbolic that we have a press conference only about implementation now and a press conference only about negotiations later. I really do want to acknowledge that, having been involved in this process since Lima, when the idea first came up under the presidency of COP20, that the Brazilian presidency really has taken the action agenda and for the first time put it at the centre of a COP, and that's really given a massive injection of energy to the thousands of organisations. I mean, first of all, to the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, to the Climate Champions team, to the Marrakesh Partnership, this massive collaboration of indigenous peoples and local communities, civil society, cities, states, businesses, finance, this kind of mass of non-state actors. And I think we are seeing in these weeks this collective work being taken to another level of energy, of positivity, of ambition and of pragmatism. The hard work of rolling sleeves up and getting things done. And also you've given us the gift of this beautiful word, mutirao, which I think is very well encapsulated in the plan which the champions Nigard and Dan have presented over the next 5 years, which I think will provide a really useful structure for future presidencies. Just to give a sense of the momentum that's built and a bit of the process, in Glasgow we launched the 2030 Clean Power Plan. In Dubai we had a commitment of countries and private sector, not all countries but many countries, to treble renewable power. In Baku we had commitments on grid strengthening and storage, and here we have the utility companies of the world committing to over $1 trillion of investment in strengthening grids. And that's quite a typical process. First of all, you have the vision, then the commitment, and then you have to roll sleeves up. But this process is now allowing us to drive from commitment to action in a much more systemic way. I wanted to also share a factoid from the real economy, just in case anyone is believing any of the stories they're hearing about all businesses going backwards. The Science Based Targets Initiative, which was the basis of the Race to Zero, which we launched in COP26, has seen a trebling of the number of companies committing to science-based net zero targets in the last 18 months. There are a few companies who've gone backwards, but the vast majority are going forwards. A lot of those actually, interestingly, in Latin America and in Asia. We've seen the big push on sustainable fuels launched here, quadrupling by 2035. Evidence of exponential growth in green industrialisation, still early but starting to pick up. Many finance initiatives, the TFFF of course, Some of the really innovative work that's been done here in Brazil under the Eco-Invest banner, the Earth Investment Engine, which Bruno mentioned. We've seen many partners come together to build a pipeline of nearly $30 billion of vetted, investable bioeconomy opportunities, and more investors looking at that. I love the focus on oceans. We've been very involved in the mangroves breakthrough, and now to hear about the seagrass breakthrough and then the peatlands breakthrough. So we're learning how to organise ourselves as sub-communities around these challenging topics and get very practical. Bruno mentioned the Rio 30, the 3 Rio Convention Synergy event. For me, part of the vision that I've always had of the action agenda is that if you're restoring degraded land, you don't need to know that you're in service of one or the other of the Rio conventions. You just need to know it's a good thing to do for your farm or for your community. And so we are starting to see the action agendas coming together. The Riyadh Action Agenda had an event as part of the land focus where Dr. Osama, the Deputy Minister, spoke about that synergy, which is really heartening. Just one more to give you an example. The Action Agenda on Regenerative Landscapes announced $9 billion of committed finance to regenerate 210 million hectares and improve the livelihoods of 12 million farmers. There's lots and lots of these initiatives, more than ever, many of them driving forward from previous commitments and some of them new. And I just really encourage all of you looking at this COP, not just to look at the gap, which we often talk about, but also look at the momentum, because the way we close the gap is by driving momentum, and that momentum is building exponentially in almost every sector. Thank you.
Thank you to our guests for their remarks today, and with that, we can open up for questions from the media. I have someone here on the second row.
Hi, I'm Alice Martins. I'm from Amazonia Vox. I'm seeing with great enthusiasm how oceans finally being approached at this COP. But I ask myself, how do you see this really entering in the negotiation text? I know this is not a negotiation press conference, but do you see like can we have some hope that, ocean, mangroves or maritime, those words could be on the text, on the final text in some way?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, we are working on that, and we are quite optimistic that will happen, because when people ask me if the ocean will be at the COP30 as a main figure, I always say, well, it has to be. It's the main climate regulator of our planet. So we are optimists. We are working for that, and as you said, it's not a negotiation, but we are working, talk with the parties and with who can talk, and showing we have been doing that for months, and now very intense in this whole week. So we are hoping for the best. Yes, finger crossed.
And maybe I could add, of course it's a fair question, but I think much more interesting is that 8 of the Brazilian states who have mangroves have joined and signed up to the mangrove breakthrough. I'm pretty confident we'll see Indonesia join, and then basically we have all of the mangrove host countries part of the mangroves breakthrough. So it would be great if it's anchored in the text, but I think even if it's not mentioned at all of that work is ongoing, and that's why I think I'd encourage you to look. You probably are looking in detail at the work of the mangroves breakthrough, but both the negotiations domain and the domain of implementation are important, not just one.
No, I think if I can just add to that, it's very briefly, and I do understand that there's a lot of interest in the negotiations, but the thinking is, do we need 198 countries to agree about something on oceans for us to advance on actions on oceans? And I think that, of course, it's very important to recognize, but at the same time, exactly as Nigel was saying, the story is, what are we doing already? What are we implementing? What are we able to move ahead? And I think that the brilliant package of oceans that Marinês just walked us through, in itself, it's extremely significant, and it gives a very clear picture of where do we need to invest, which will clarify to the investors where we need to go. So I would just put that in balance. what do we actually need from the 198 countries versus what is the real world economy doing and needing to advance faster.
As a reminder, we kindly ask only members of the media to pose questions, so if we could have your badge clearly visible, would help us out to understand if you're a member of the press or no. We can go over here to the second row.
Hi, Hi, Ilona Cardial for Carbon Pulse. Bruna, could you please give us an update and some comments on the deforestation and fossil fuels roadmaps, the growing support about it, and how these decisions could be an outcome for the COP, since they are happening in the action agenda, please?
Yeah, I think some of these matters will be better addressed later on our second press conference, unless Bruna wants to comment on something. We would,
yes, I think
invite you to be with us at 6:30.
Exactly. I think maybe this is a question for the negotiators of how, if and how any roadmaps would come out of the negotiations. What I can speak to is what is happening in the action agenda for both those spaces of transitioning away from fossil fuels and forests. So as I've said, what we're doing in the action agenda is looking at what are the solutions for us to be able to do both those things. We have objectives related, we have one objective out of the 30 that is related to transitioning away from fossil fuels. As part of that objective, we have a number of initiatives that have put forward plans to accelerate solutions. That includes, for example, the sustainable fuels, because we need alternatives if we are to transition away. It also includes an initiative that is working around how do you reduce subsidies and the fiscal space to transition away from fossil fuels. There are initiatives that are looking at the planning side of this. How do you prepare the countries to plan? And you have BOGA, which is doing that as well with a number of countries that wants to prepare ahead and to plan for that transition to be just and to be equitable as it needs to be. So I think in the action agenda, there is a lot that's going on in that space, and it has been for many years. Again, as Nigel said, it's not something that we're creating at this COP. What we're doing at this COP is supporting the ecosystem to organize itself to accelerate. On the forest side, I just talked through a number of solutions that are being accelerated. So we have two objectives on forests, one that's related to paragraph 33 of the global stocktake and one that's related to paragraph 34. So basically one focusing on investments in the economic signals and one that's focusing on the actions and the solutions to halt and reverse. And we have things on the actions to accelerate on solutions, things like integrated fire management that I was just talking about. But on the investment side, we're looking at JRED, at TFFF, there's this roadmap to finance forests and bioeconomy, as Nigel was just saying, with private capital, public capital. So there are many solutions that will be in that basket. I think for forests, we probably have around 5 on investments plus 5 on the halting and reversing forest loss.
Thank you, Bruna. We can have a few more questions. Sorry, sir, are you accredited as media? I can see you from here. Yeah, we can go over here.
Thank you. Josh Gabatis from Carbon Brief. I think as both of those questions demonstrated, a lot of the focus here, a lot of the attention is on the negotiations and extreme divergences of opinion in the negotiations. My question is, if the COP ends and we have perhaps an unambitious outcome from the negotiations, how is the Brazilian presidency sort of working to amplify the work that you've been talking about in the action agenda to sort of create a positive story at the end, even if the negotiations end in disappointment? And also, because this is a non-negotiated, a presidency-led thing, are you concerned that it could completely lose momentum in the future if you have a presidency that isn't interested in pursuing the action agenda? Thank you.
So I think we have been working since the beginning, understanding that COP was to be worked in 4 pillars: the Leader Summit, so the political momentum, which we've had at the beginning of the process, the negotiations, the action agenda, and mobilization across the 3 objectives that we've set out on protecting multilateralism, accelerating implementation, and bringing this discussion closer to what actually matters for people's real lives. So it is never about one thing or the other. It won't be one thing making up the success for the others, but actually that all needs to work together, right? You need what's coming out of the negotiations as signals, but we really need the action agenda to become a more active space if we are to accelerate implementation, in the sense that it is not only the 198 countries that implement, but for implementation you need the people who are not in the negotiating rooms. You need the private sector, you need the funders, you need the investors, the subnational governments, cities, states, and you need civil society. So those things should walk, and we are working so that they walk more and more hand in hand in this implementation phase.
It's a really good question. I do note though, when you say a lot of attention, that means your attention. You've chosen to pay attention, and I'm trying to say, don't just pay. Well, I'm trying to say, don't just pay attention to the negotiations. The negotiations is not the whole world. It is not the only dynamic which drives change. And yes, it's not negotiated, but it's created by the parties specifically to have another way of driving momentum amongst non-party stakeholders, because the parties had the wisdom in Peru and Paris to recognise that. So an invitation to choose to put a bit more attention on the action agenda. I think, but of course it is a really good question, and we, you know, in Madrid, in the Chile COP, the champions were invited to put together a 5-year plan, which we did in Glasgow, and that's pretty much been followed, because we put in place a plan and the resources to deliver it, and you can see that plan survived across multiple presidencies who had some slightly different priorities, but still those initiatives continued. I think this presidency has lifted up the importance of that, and the 2 champions have put together the next 5-year plan. So I think that a lot of the answer to that question is the extent to which that next 5-year plan is followed.
I just want to add to that as the action agenda was organizing this COP, it was very clear that we had to work with solutions and organizations that were already doing that. Solutions that are already there. So they have responsibles. They have people that are working that, no state responsibles. So it will continue. And they are what we, this COP presidency that's organized in the different 6 pillars, 6 axes. And then when it comes to ocean, we managed to put all the solutions underneath this framework of sustainable ocean planning and management, because we do believe we need the ocean health in a good health to help us. And all the solutions are there, are responsible, are people that are already there doing things, non-state governments mainly. So despite what we have in the final negotiations, it will be implemented. We are working for that.
So if I can just go on that, I think that's something we've been hearing repeatedly. What we have done with structuring the action agenda in the way that we have is to empower these communities of action. So hopefully that has built enough ecosystem. Some of these groups that we have put together, the first time we put them together, they told us we had never sat in the same room together and talked. So it's a really good thing that there will be, it's this energy coming out of this process. There are a number of elements in terms of continuities. Of course, it will depend on the presidencies, but Nigel talked about the 5-year plan, which is public, and I hope that you've had a chance to have a look at that. But there is essentially the infrastructure, the people who are doing, being empowered to continue to do that.
Thank you. We can take one more question over there.
Thank you. Ayrton Escobar, do Jornal da USP. My question is about, Marinês, if you could explain a little more what the blue package is, because yesterday there was a lot of confusion about what the word package meant in the negotiations. Is it a combination of different things, like an umbrella term, or is it a product in itself?
Okay, thank you for the question. Each of the key objectives of the action agenda has come out with a plan to acceleration the solutions that are already there, that we are talking about, that they are delivered by non-state governments mainly. So the plan to accelerate solutions that the coastal and ocean solutions we put together, we call that blue package. But really is the plan to accelerate solutions that we managed to put everything under the same framework of, as I said, sustainable ocean planning and management, and delivered by the ocean breakthroughs that are science-based targets that have been discussed for the last 5-6 years. So it's just a name, a brand name for the plan to accelerate solutions, and then we have all the ocean-based solutions under this blue package. Some other objectives, they deliver different plans, okay, for each solution. So we decide, and also it was very inspired, I have to say, by the adaptation plan of Brazil, that put all the solutions that we want for ocean-based solutions for climate in Brazil in one package. So that's why we are calling package. We are inspired by Brazil and did the same for the international arena.
So different to the packages that you have on negotiations, this is a packet of solutions in the real world. I think that is the logic, and Marinês listed it out, the solutions that are a part of that package. So mangroves, sustainable renewable energies from the ocean, shipping decarbonization, sustainable aquatic food, marine conservation, coastal tourism, entrepreneurship and innovation, people's and transitions from offshore oil and gas. So that is the solutions package from the oceans.
Thank you. And we have one more question over there.
Hi, I'm Nayara from Eixos. There is anything about deep sea mine in this blue package?
No, exactly. We are one of the, well, there is conservation, okay? The marine conservation breakthrough that talks about we need to conserve and all the environments of the ocean and coastal areas, so it goes there. And then the transition options for offshore oil and gas, so that's one that's a solution into a discussion that just starts, brand new, is a potential one. That there we will discuss different kinds of energy, what do you need, and then I'm sure that we will be discussing deep sea mining in that part as well in the future.
Thank you. If we don't have any more questions, we turn it over to our guests for any final remarks. Thanks, everyone. This concludes our press conference. I'd like to thank everyone for joining. Thank you.